You've been lied to about attachment, what they call your weakness, your inability to let go, your desperate clinging to people and outcomes. This isn't your failing. This isn't your spiritual immaturity. This is your soul demanding its lessons, and you've been taught to silence it with shame. They tell you to detach. They tell you that suffering comes from wanting, that peace comes from not caring. But what if your attachment isn't the problem? What if it's the doorway? What if the very thing you've been told to transcend is actually trying to teach you something so profound that your entire being revolts against letting it go? The spiritual teachers speak of non-attachment like it's some elevated state, some mountain peak of consciousness where you float above human need and desire. But they've confused detachment with death. They've mistaken numbness for enlightenment. They've turned the rich, pulsing, demanding nature of your soul into something to be ashamed of. Your attachment isn't your enemy. It's your guru in disguise. It's your soul's way of saying there's something here you need to understand. Something so important that I will make you suffer until you learn it. Something so sacred that I will not let you walk away unchanged. Every sleepless night you've spent thinking about someone who left. Every tear you've shed over a dream that died. Every moment you've ached for something you couldn't have. These weren't signs of your weakness. These were your soul's curriculum. These were the classes you couldn't skip, the lessons you couldn't avoid, the initiations disguised as heartbreak. But they told you to get over it, to move on, to be reasonable, to be mature. They gave you a spirituality that feared intensity, that worshipped control, that mistook emotional flatness for inner peace. They taught you that the path to God was through the diminishment of desire, not through its sacred transformation. What if they were wrong? What if your attachment isn't what separates you from the divine, but what connects you to it? From the moment you could understand words, they taught you that wanting was dangerous. That needing made you weak. That the safe path was the path of small desires, modest dreams, controlled hearts. They gave you a spirituality of diminishment, dressed up as wisdom. In childhood, when you clung to your mother's dress, they said you were too dependent. When you wept for the friend who moved away, they said you were too sensitive. When you raged against the loss of what you loved, they said you needed to learn acceptance. They took your soul's deepest capacity, its ability to love so fiercely that it would risk everything, and they called it dysfunction. The churches spoke of surrendering your will to God, but they meant surrendering your will to their version of God. A God who apparently preferred you small, grateful, and undemanding. The philosophers spoke of transcending desire, but they meant transcending the very force that moves mountains, that births stars, that creates worlds from nothing but longing. You learned to apologize for your intensity. You learned to hide your hunger. You learned to call your depth too much and your passion unhealthy attachment. But what if your soul knew something they didn't? What if your attachment wasn't the disease, but the cure? What if every time you couldn't let go, every time you held on when logic said release, every time you chose to stay attached when wisdom said detach? What if those were the moments your soul was trying to teach you about the nature of love itself, about commitment that transcends convenience, about loyalty that doesn't calculate cost? They taught you that mature love is conditional, measured, reasonable, that spiritual people don't get attached, that enlightened beings float above the messy, painful, beautiful chaos of human connection. They gave you examples of masters who needed nothing, wanted nothing, cared about nothing with any intensity. But your soul knows a different truth, that some attachments are meant to transform you, not comfort you, that some connections are meant to break you open, not keep you safe, that some loves are meant to demand everything, not ask for nothing. The mystics they don't quote knew this. The saints they sanitized understood this. The poets they ignore sang this, that the path to the infinite runs directly through the particular, that you learn to love everyone by learning to love someone completely, that you discover unconditional love by first experiencing conditional love so deeply that all conditions dissolve. Your attachment isn't your failure to be spiritual. It's your apprenticeship in divinity. It's how your soul learns to love like God loves, completely, irrationally, without protection, without guarantee, without the promise of return. But they were afraid of this love. They were terrified of what happens when human beings attach to each other with divine intensity. They knew that this kind of love changes everything, threatens everything, transforms everything it touches. So they taught you to be afraid of it too. They called it codependency. They called it unhealthy. They called it immature. But what if it was the most mature thing you've ever done? What if your refusal to let go wasn't weakness, but wisdom your mind couldn't understand? In the ancient traditions, before they were sanitized and commercialized, attachment was understood differently. The Sanskrit word they translate as attachment, upadana, doesn't just mean clinging. It means the fuel that feeds the fire of consciousness itself. It means the very mechanism by which the universe creates experience, by which awareness knows itself, by which the infinite expresses itself through the particular. The mystics knew something the modern spiritual teachers have forgotten, that the soul learns through engagement, not withdrawal, that consciousness expands through encounter, not escape, that the divine doesn't reveal itself in the absence of desire, but in the very depths of longing itself. When you attach deeply to another soul, when you cannot imagine existence without them, when their joy becomes your joy and their pain tears through you like a storm. This isn't weakness. This is your consciousness expanding beyond the small circle of self. This is your soul practicing for its ultimate attachment, the complete surrender to existence itself. The Buddha spoke of attachment as the root of suffering, but he also spoke of compassion, which is nothing but attachment to all beings. The Christ spoke of losing your life to save it, which is nothing but the deepest attachment to love itself, even unto death. The Sufi poets wrote of the pain of separation from the beloved, not as something to overcome, but as the very fire that purifies the heart. Rumi didn't write about detachment. He wrote about burning alive with longing. He wrote about love that consumed everything false, everything small, everything that wasn't God. His attachment to his beloved Shams was so complete that when Shams disappeared, Rumi became one of the greatest mystic poets in history. His attachment didn't limit him. It liberated him. Your attachment isn't the problem. The problem is that you've been taught to be attached to the wrong things, in the wrong way, with the wrong understanding of what attachment actually serves. You've been taught to attach to outcomes instead of presence, to security instead of growth, to comfort instead of truth, to having instead of being. But there's another way, a way of attachment that doesn't grasp but gives, a way of clinging that doesn't diminish but expands, a way of needing that doesn't empty but overflows. This is what your soul has been trying to teach you all along. The great spiritual traditions don't actually teach detachment, they teach right attachment. They teach attachment to truth instead of illusion, to love instead of fear, to presence instead of fantasy, to the eternal instead of the temporary, to the source instead of the reflection. Your soul knows this. That's why it won't let you love small. That's why it won't let you care less. That's why it keeps pulling you toward connections that terrify your mind and threaten your control. Because it's trying to teach you what real attachment looks like, what divine love feels like, what it means to connect with another being the way existence connects with itself, completely without reservation, without the promise of safety. This is the philosophical foundation your attachment rests on. That love is not a feeling, but a force. That connection is not a luxury, but a necessity. That attachment is not a weakness, but a power. The power by which consciousness knows itself, by which the infinite expresses itself, by which God loves God through the hearts of human beings. There is a sacred attachment that arises not from emptiness, but from fullness, not from what you lack, but from what you have to give, not from fear of loss, but from abundance of love. This is attachment as offering, not demand. Connection as gift, not theft. Need as service, not selfishness. When you attach from this place, you don't cling to outcomes, you commit to presence. You don't demand that others complete you, you offer your completion to the dance of relationship. You don't grasp at permanence. You dive fully into each impermanent moment, knowing that the depth of your engagement is what makes it eternal. This sacred attachment is like the sun's relationship to the earth. The sun doesn't withhold its light until the earth proves worthy. It doesn't detach from the earth when clouds block its rays. It doesn't love conditionally, strategically, or safely. It gives completely, without condition, without negotiation, because giving is its nature. Its attachment to shining creates all life. Your soul wants to love like this. It wants to attach so completely to truth, to beauty, to the sacred in each person you encounter, that you become a source of life wherever you are. Not because you need something from them, but because overflow is your nature when you're aligned with your deepest being. This is attachment without fear, connection without control, love without conditions. The very thing they told you was impossible, because they were teaching from their wounds, not from their wholeness. When you love from this place, attachment becomes service. Your need becomes gift. Your longing becomes prayer. You attach not to possess, but to bless. Not to hold, but to honor. Not to control, but to celebrate the miracle of consciousness meeting consciousness in the vast dance of existence. This is the attachment that doesn't diminish when it's not returned, that doesn't turn bitter when it's rejected, that doesn't become desperate when it's threatened, because it's not based on getting something, it's based on being something. It's not about what you can extract from the relationship, it's about what you can express through it. You become like a river that loves its banks, not because the banks contain it, but because flowing is what rivers do. You love because love is what you are, not because love is what you need. You attach because connection is your nature, not because isolation is your fear. This is the attachment your soul has been calling you toward. This is why it wouldn't let you settle for less. This is why it made you suffer when you tried to love small, safe, reasonable. Because it knew you were capable of something magnificent. Something that would transform not just you, but everyone you touch. But here's what they don't tell you about this kind of love. It requires everything. It demands that you die to who you thought you were and be reborn as who you actually are. It asks you to love without guarantees, to give without conditions, to attach without the promise of return, and your ego will resist this. Your mind will call it foolish. Your friends will call it unhealthy. But your soul will recognize it as the very reason you came here, as the curriculum you enrolled in when you chose to be human, as the path back to the divine love that is your true nature. This is not attachment as weakness, this is attachment as strength. Not attachment as need, but attachment as gift. Not attachment as taking, but attachment as offering. This is love so full, so complete, so unconditional that it looks like madness to a world that has forgotten what sanity actually is. But even this sacred attachment must know its seasons. Even the sun withdraws into night. Even the river must sometimes become still water, reflecting only sky. There comes a time when the deepest attachment is to silence itself, to the void that births all connection, to the emptiness that makes fullness possible. The soul that has learned to love without grasping must also learn to love without presence. There are moments when your greatest gift to another is your absence, when your deepest attachment must be to letting them find their own way through the darkness, when love means disappearing so completely that your very absence becomes a presence. This is the attachment that ends all attachment, the commitment to letting go so fully that even letting go becomes effortless. The mystics called this the dark night of the soul, but they understood something crucial. This darkness isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's the void that creates space for something new to be born. In these moments of withdrawal, when you can no longer attach to anything familiar, when even your sacred connections must be surrendered, you discover the deepest attachment of all, your attachment to existence itself. Not to any particular form of existence, but to the mystery that makes existence possible. You learn to cling to the space between thoughts, to the silence between heartbeats, to the pause between breaths. You discover that true detachment isn't the absence of attachment, it's attachment to the source from which all attachments arise and to which they all return. This is where your soul has been leading you all along. Through all the attachments that broke your heart, through all the connections that didn't last, through all the love that wasn't returned. Your soul was teaching you about impermanence not so you would stop loving, but so you would learn to love what cannot be lost. In this silence, you understand that every attachment was temporary, but the capacity to attach is eternal. Every relationship was finite, but the ability to relate is infinite. Every love ended, but love itself never dies. It just finds new forms, new expressions, new ways to know itself through you. This is the final lesson your soul has been preparing you for. Not the absence of attachment, but attachment so complete, so unconditional, so aligned with the nature of reality itself that it needs no object. You become attached to the very capacity to love, regardless of what or whom you love. Here, in this sacred emptiness, you discover what the mystics meant when they spoke of union with God. It's not that you merge with some distant deity. It's that you recognize yourself as love loving itself, as consciousness knowing itself, as existence experiencing itself through the temporary form of your individual life. The attachments that once seemed so personal, so specific, so necessary, you see them now as love learning to love more deeply, as consciousness practicing to be more conscious, as God experiencing what it's like to be human, to need, to want, to attach, to lose, to grieve, to let go, and finally to remember that nothing was ever really lost because everything was always already won. In this silence, in this sacred emptiness, you understand what all your attachments were really about. They were practice, they were preparation, they were your soul's way of teaching you to love with the same unconditional intensity that existence itself loves you into being, moment after moment, breath after breath. And now you know. The deepest attachment is to this mystery itself, to the source that creates all forms and lets them go, to the love that expresses itself through relationship and transcends all relationships, to the consciousness that knows itself through connection and rests in its own eternal nature. The invitation is this: stop apologizing for your depth. Stop hiding your intensity. Stop calling your soul's greatest capacity your greatest weakness. Your attachment isn't your failure, it's your genius. It's how consciousness knows itself through relationship. It's how love learns to love more deeply. It's how the infinite expresses itself through the particular dance of human connection. But learn the difference. Learn to attach from overflow, not emptiness. Learn to cling to truth, not comfort. Learn to commit to presence, not possession. Learn to love from fullness, not fear. And learn when attachment itself must bow to the deeper attachment, the soul's relationship with its own eternal nature. Your attachments haven't been mistakes. They've been your curriculum. They've been the way your soul has been teaching you about the nature of love, the reality of impermanence, the beauty of vulnerability, the power of commitment, and the necessity of letting go. Every person you couldn't forget was a teacher. Every relationship that ended was a lesson. Every attachment that caused you pain was your soul's way of showing you what's eternal, by letting you experience what's temporary, what's infinite, by letting you explore what's finite, what's unconditional, by letting you feel what it's like when conditions change. If this resonates in the depths of your being, if something in you recognizes this truth even when your mind resists it, write in the comments. I choose attachment from abundance, not scarcity. Let this be your commitment to loving from fullness rather than fear, to connecting from strength rather than need, to attaching from wisdom rather than desperation. This isn't just about relationships. This is about your relationship with your own existence. About whether you'll spend your life apologizing for your intensity or learning to wield it like the sacred force it actually is. About whether you'll hide your capacity for deep love or offer it as a gift to a world that has forgotten how to feel deeply. The soul that has learned true attachment becomes unattachable, not because it doesn't care, but because it cares so completely, so unconditionally, so abundantly, that it needs nothing in return. It loves like the sun shines, not because it must, but because it cannot do otherwise. It connects like the river flows, not to get somewhere, but because flowing is its nature. Your attachment isn't the problem. Your fear of your own depth is the problem. Your apology for your own intensity is the problem. Your belief that you must choose between loving fully and being free is the problem. Your assumption that spiritual people don't attach deeply is the problem. The answer isn't less attachment. The answer is attachment so complete, so sacred, so aligned with your deepest nature that it becomes indistinguishable from freedom itself. This is what your soul has been trying to teach you all along. This is the lesson disguised as attachment. This is the gift hidden in what you thought was your greatest weakness. You are not too much. Your love is not too intense. Your need for connection is not a character flaw. Your inability to love casually is not a problem to be solved. It's a gift to be honored, a capacity to be celebrated, a power to be wielded consciously. The world needs your depth. It needs your intensity. It needs your refusal to love small. It needs your commitment to feeling deeply in a culture that has numbed itself to sleep. It needs your attachment to truth in a world that has attached itself to illusions.